Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. This is episode 2 of my new series Price Check, where we take a look at a handful of games and I kind of give my thoughts and impressions on where I see the prices going in the future. Unfortunately, most of the time I do think prices are going to go up on a lot of the games that I look at, but I do try to be on the lookout for games that might kind of stay the same, or in rare instances actually drop in price. Also, I wanted to thank all of you for the overwhelming positive support and reception to the first episode that I did of this. I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the content. And I'm always really glad to brainstorm and innovate new ideas for the YouTube scene in terms of content that really nobody else is kind of doing in this sense. So I'm glad you guys really enjoy it. Also, I just wanted to say going forward, what I'm going to do is leave a comment below. Every new episode of Price Check going forward, I'm going to pick one comment of somebody that suggests a game for me to take a look at. So you could be like, hey Pete, I want to see you take a look at this Nintendo game, and another person's like, I want to see you take a look at this PlayStation game, and I will just pick somebody from the comments to talk about the game that they chose in the next video, and of course give them a little shout out. So what do you say we jump right into the first game? Let's not waste too much time here. The big elephant in the room, and that is Shantae. Now there's a lot of activity around Shantae right now because, well, Limited Run Games recently released a physical, essentially re-release of the Game Boy Color game. Comes with its own fancy box, comes with its own cart manual. It's a really, nice way for people to get a copy of Shantae physically of the original Game Boy Color game if they weren't looking to pay, $2,000 for the complete in box version. And my guess is there's probably a lot of you that don't want to pay $2,000 for the complete in box version. Now, this is a very interesting discussion, right? I'm sure this is a question on a lot of people's minds. Will Shantae, the most expensive Game Boy Color game, come down in price now that there is a mass influx of physical copies out there, right? The market is being flooded. Shouldn't this bring down the price of Shantae? And unfortunately, my answer for that is no. And I'm going to tell you why. The collector mentality is really important to understand for games that get as expensive as Shantae, okay? People that are paying, even back in 2013, people that were paying $400-500+ for copies of Shantae Complete, as you can see here, they weren't buying it because they really wanted to play it. Maybe a handful of people, really were buying it to play it, but let's be real here. Most people, especially starting around 2019, most people are not going to be paying $1,000 to be playing this game, right? A lot of those people will take alternative means, whether that's through emulation or getting reproduction carts, because this price is just kind of unfeasible, right? So the current market price of $2,000 or more, that is not going to go down because the people that want Shantae Complete in the box, they only want Shantae Complete in the box, the original version, because it is a collectible. They need it for their collection. They are not necessarily buying Shantae to play. In fact, I would actually argue that most people spending that amount of money would probably keep it nice and pristine in the box, pretty much never touch the thing, and may have a reproduction cart on the side, maybe the Limited Run Games re-release, so that they can play it easily. So people that want to play Shantae now have a new means, right? So if we look at eBay here, people that have always wanted to play Shantae but maybe didn't want to do it through emulation now have a new means to do so. Maybe they missed the period to pick this up. However, as you can see, the price for this is way more reasonable. These are the reproductions. These are way more reasonable than spending $2,000. So it's not going to bring the price down, because the people that need it for their collection, they are still going to want the original, and the supply is very limited, and it's still very much in demand for people that are collecting Game Boy Color. So there is absolutely no reason that this will bring down the price of that. However, I do believe that this reproduction re-release will bring down the price of cart-only copies. Now, I'm sure there are not too many collectors out there that collect cart-only Game Boy Color games. I could see cart-only Game Boy, but Game Boy Color games don't really stack all that well on top of one another. And personally, in all the years I've been collecting, I haven't met very many people that collect cart-only Game Boy Color. Especially because back in the day, Game Boy Color games complete were actually very cheap. Not so much the case anymore, but there's not a lot of them out there, I feel. However, people that were actually really wanting the original cart for their own personal reasons to play, because let's face it, if you're spending hundreds of dollars on an authentic cart, it's probably because you want to play it, less so the collectability aspect of it. I think those people will be very glad to pick up a copy of these, and in turn, bring down the demand of the official carts. because, well, there's a new supply of much cheaper, nicer alternatives for them. And I just don't think there's enough people out there collecting cart-only Game Boy Color to really have a desire to pick up the OG cart. Will it bring down the price dramatically? Absolutely not. There's always going to be a demand for it. Maybe people have the box or the manual and they want the cart or something. It may stabilize the price, right? So if we look at loose prices here, as you can see, cart-only Game Boy prices, or cart-only copies of Shantae, have kind of been stagnant. And if you see here, with the sudden increase in complete and box prices, there wasn't really a dramatic increase in cart-only prices. Now, of course, this is due to supply. There's not too many going around, so the sample size is probably quite small. However, comparatively to the price increase for complete, there really hasn't been too much of a momentum in the way of cart-only. So to summarize, complete copies of Shantae and Game Boy Color original, they're only going to stay the same and continue to go up. They're not going to see a drop. People that need them for their collection, they're going to always need it. Supply is limited. Collector, that's that collector mentality, right? The limited run games version is not good enough for them. They need the original. Shantae is becoming a very popular series, and a lot of people and fans want the original copy. They don't want any kind of re-release. It's just how collecting goes for some people. Card only, OG, will probably about remain the same, maybe fluctuate a little bit, but I don't see a dramatic price increase in that in the future. The good news is there's a new influx of a nice, fancy new reproduction for Shantae for people that are interested. All right, let's move on to the next game. We're going to be talking about Jet Set Radio Future. Now, this is an interesting one. We're specifically talking about the Xbox version that is not the pack-in with the GT Sports game. So why do I want to talk about Jet Set Radio Future? Well, not only is this a beloved series, but there's something going on behind the scenes right now. Two things, actually, which is very interesting. So maybe you've been paying attention to Twitter news recently, but Sega recently had a essentially an internal conference among the company saying that they're looking to bring back a lot of their dormant and unused IPs and series, and Jet Set Radio, Jet Grind Radio was one of the ones mentioned. So what does this mean? They are looking into the future of this series, which has been dead since Xbox 2002. And they're looking for a way to bring it back potentially in the future. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they are paying attention to this. This here is a new game not coming out from Sega. It's essentially a game that is coming out from, I forget the developers, but it's not Sega themselves. They do have the original composer for the series coming on for this. And if you can't tell, this looks exactly like the Jet Grind Radio games, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. So I'm sure Sega is watching this very closely to see what the fan reception is. And I'm sure they see this as 500,000 views, 39,000 likes on the trailer. So you better bet that they are paying attention right now to the hype behind Jet Grind Radio, Jet Set Radio Future, and seeing that fans are indeed clamoring for this series. Now, of course, they're getting beat to the punch by the time they bring out their own iteration of this. Well, this new one is going to be out. Is it a Jet Grind Radio game? No, it isn't. But I mean, let's be real. If you've seen the trailer and some of the gameplay, it's a Jet Grind Radio game. Okay, so when Bomb Rush comes out, I do actually believe that the demand for this series, and leading very close up to the release of it, as articles start hitting the internet and start talking about it, and if it is positively received, I guarantee you that you will see an increase in demand and interest once again for this series. So let's take a look at selling prices for this right now to get a better idea. All right, so currently right now it is selling for around the $70 mark on average, I would say. Prices fluctuate depending on condition and if it's completely complete. But I can see this going up, okay? Will it go up dramatically? No, because of the compilation, right? There is the version where it comes with GT Sport, which is extremely common, extremely cheap. This is a more of a collector's kind of thing, right? So there's an affordable version out there that you can get if you don't mind it being bundled with another game and having kind of bad box art. This is kind of desirable for collectors because it has a nice foil cover. It's got the Only on Xbox logo on here, which of course always makes it more desirable for collectors. I'm not sure if the other one has that offhand. It probably does. But yeah, this is the one that collectors are always going to want because, well, once again, that's just the collector mentality, right? How much will this go up is the question. Well, it depends what Sega decides to do with this game. Maybe they re-release an HD version, right? Maybe that's how they deal with it to gauge interest. They come out with a nice, shiny, widescreen HD Jet Set Radio Future re-release. Sega is very much known for coming out with re-releases of games in a nice HD fashion, so I don't think that's out of the cards at all. So the price of this could kind of remain the same if they start doing stuff like that. However, that isn't always true. People have a false mindset that if a game is re-released in a better version, that will drive down the prices of the original. This is far from the truth. Sometimes it could actually drive up interest and prices in the originals even more so. A good example is the Crash Bandicoot series. When it got the Insane trilogy, that actually rose and drove up the prices of the original Crash Bandicoot. And people, yes, it did spike, but it came back down, but it is very expensive again, right? That's a good example that I like using. So where do I see the price of this in the future? I don't see it going too much higher above 80, 90-ish. I mean, if it hits $100, then who knows where it can go from there, right? Because that's usually the sort of breaking point. Once a game hits the triple digits, it can skyrocket at any moment, I think, after that. But if it maintains this sort of $70, $80 price range, I don't think you got too much to worry about. But it's just an interesting thought to see what's going to happen with the future of this, considering what's going on internally in Sega and with the Bomb Rush game. Okay, let's talk about another Sega game. I am trying to mix things up here by talking about different systems and different genres and everything. But we're gonna touch upon a Sega game. You know, Jet Set was Xbox, but it is a Sega game. But this is on a Sega console. This is an exclusive. This is Blue Stinger. This is a game that I played for the first time last October. This is a survival horror game, and it's a very weird and silly and very unpolished at times horror game. However, I fell in love with this. It's very campy. It's very fun. It definitely has its moments. It's over the top, gory B-horror movie feel to it. And I think that sort of Campy B-movie style is really coming back, not just in the video game medium, but also with the advent of like VHS collectors. You know, just the nostalgia of collecting older things right now. Vinyl, another example, right? This kind of fits within that. It feels like we're watching a horror movie from the 80s or the 90s kind of feel. So there's a lot more interest in Blue Stinger, and as you can see here, this game has always been cheap. It is worth also noting that this was a launch title in the United States. I don't remember about other regions offhand, but it was a launch game in the US, which always kept the prices very low. Look at this, under $10 for a copy of this back in 2014. However, as you can see, as with a lot of games in 2020, it saw a pretty big increase in price, maybe about 100% price increase, and now it's starting to creep up even more in 2021. So this is interesting, right? Because as you see here, the beginning of 2020 was the biggest price spike for all games, and the fact that this actually started to come down a tiny bit, and then all of a sudden it's climbing again, something put this game back into the spotlight for people, right? Because we saw the price increase and then it started to come back down towards the $22 range, which wasn't too far off of what this was going for a couple years ago. However, it's going back up. Okay, so this is a horror game, right? You know what my saying is with horror games. Horror games only go up. They never really ever come down. Even when a HD version comes out, people want the originals. This is a horror game. Is it more sci-fi? You can argue. More sci-fi action, sure, but it is definitely a horror game. And as you can see the asking prices right now, there's really nobody asking under $50 for this game. And this is, once again, very important. When people want to play Blue Stinger, they're going to come on here and they're going to see, oh, gee, I can't get a copy of this for under $50. I guess I'm going to be forced to get it for $50 because some people are impatient and they don't want to wait and try and get a better deal. Now, let's take a look at how prices have been going recently. As you can see, this is a sealed copy. We ignore sealed. $50 most recently for complete, 43, near 60, 45, 45. So this game is definitely trending towards the $50 price range. So people are going to look at this and they're going to be like, well, it seems to be going in this direction. Let's get it for 50, right? Because as we can see, it is heading in that direction in recent sales. If you scroll down a little bit, though, you can see not that long ago, and a lot of copies of this are selling. This is also very important to see. Seeing copies of this sell in quick succession, I mean, look how many copies of this have sold just in May. This shows that people want this game right now. Copies are not sitting unsold for long periods of time. eBay is starting to dry up with copies of Blue Stinger. But if you scroll far enough down, you can see that back not too long ago, copies were still going in the $35 range. But that doesn't really seem to be the case anymore, right? Why would somebody come on eBay and suddenly list a copy of Blue Stinger for $30, $35 when all other copies are currently selling for $50 and all other asking prices around $50? Unless they want to seriously undercut, I don't think you're really going to see too much more of that in the future, or maybe they're not aware of the current market prices, or they can come on to price charting, see the average of 42 and be like, you know what, let's cut down that price a little bit. Let's make it 35, right? Because they want it to sell fast. I can see that actually happening. Price charting not always up to par on current market price, but sometimes it's pretty accurate, sometimes it's not. So now, the one thing to keep in mind about where I'm going to predict the price on this going, Blue Stinger is a pretty common game. This is not a rare game. This was a highly printed game, readily always available for the Dreamcast. Of course, that availability has dried up recently. However, it is important to know that if you look at the dates that these games sell, there's usually only a day or two between sales, which means it's selling a lot, which means there's a lot of copies out there. Which means that a lot of people that may, be wanting to sell some of their collection, or maybe even have doubles of Blue Stinger, one day they're going to be looking through and they're going to be like, wow, Blue Stinger's going for that much money, and they're going to list their copy because they don't really, maybe they didn't like the game, maybe they got in excess of it. They're going to list it, and there's always going to be a nice steady supply of this because so many exist in people's collections, right? If you bought a Dreamcast when it launched, you probably had a pretty decent chance of owning this game. So there will always be a steady influx of copies available. However, because of the genre that it falls into, because it is 100% exclusive to the Dreamcast, this is going to go up. Is it going to go to astronomical levels? No. I'd be surprised if Blue Stinger breaks $100. I think this would eventually kind of settle in the $70-ish range, 80 at the most. I don't think you need to panic buy this game. I think it'll always be readily available for you, so don't worry about rushing out and buying copies on eBay at the moment. I think it'll be a slow climb. But yeah, that's just kind of my take on Blue Stinger. Good game. You should definitely try it this October. All right. Next, we are going to go on to a Patreon request, and this comes in from Eric on Patreon. Just goes by Eric. Thank you, Eric, for requesting this next game. Once again, for those of you that want to guarantee that I talk about a game of your choice, all you got to do is go over to my Patreon, and I do have a pledge level that will let you request a game for an episode of Price Check, and I will talk about whatever game it is that you want me to talk about. In this case, we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters on the Genesis. So this I thought was a really good choice. I have not played this game yet. However, I did pick this up a long time ago, so I do have it, thankfully. So why is it a good idea to kind of talk about Ghostbusters right now? Well, if you weren't aware, there's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out in, what is the release window for this right now? November 11th, 2021. So this year, they're going to be coming out with a new Ghostbusters movie that, importantly, is not a reboot of the series. It is a direct sequel to the original two Ghostbusters films, with a lot of the original actors coming back, including Bill Murray, which has always been a topic, as you can see in the wiki here, of hot contention since he didn't want to do this in the past. So this is kind of a big deal for Ghostbusters fans, and I think the hype around this is going to draw a lot of interest to all Ghostbusters games, but especially ones that are already sort of sought after and somewhat rare, and also considered a good game, which this is. I do hear it is quite difficult, but I do hear it is a good game. So if you look here, these are loose prices. Let's put it on Complete in Box. Once again, a game that has kind of pretty much remained steady for many years and then saw a huge increase in June, which only seems to be going up, with a current market value of approximately $130, okay? So it's going up. So what kind of example do I have for where I see the price of this going? So first of all, recently we had a new Godzilla film come out, right? Kong versus Godzilla. And that actually made all Godzilla games have a pretty big spike increase. In fact, even the King Kong game on Xbox 360 was upwards of $70, $80 at the height of the hype of that movie. Important to know, though, while the price did go up on all of those Godzilla games and King Kong, the price has come back down, right? So movie hype can drive prices up in a general trend. But once that hype starts to die down, games that have a surplus of availability will come back down a little bit, right? Because people are kind of panicking and buying games to get excited for the new movies that are coming out. And I do think that will be something that happens for these Ghostbusters games as we get closer. About a month or two out from the film, I think once the big trailer hits for this, whenever they release like some next big trailer for the new film, I think that's when you're going to start to see people look into the Ghostbusters games, right? People on YouTube are going to make videos talking about the Ghostbusters games because that's going to be the hot thing. That's going to be the bait to get people in to watch the video because everybody's excited for the movie. But where do I actually see the price of this going? So Sega Genesis games in general are going up a lot, especially anything that is exclusive of certain genres. This is exclusive to the Genesis. This is a Genesis-only Ghostbusters game, despite having such a generic name and a generic cover. There's no other port or version of this specifically available anywhere else. So Genesis collectors are going to want this. Ghostbusters fans are going to want this. And in general, people that are fans of platformer action games are going to want this. And people that are into games that are themed around horror are also going to want this, since I would consider this to be a horror-adjacent game. Also, what do I mean by horror adjacent? It's a term that I throw around a lot. It means that it's not directly a super spooky, scary horror game in a sense, but it has elements like ghosts and monsters and spooky themes, right? Think of horror adjacent more as a spooky game, but not delving too deep into that sort of traditional horror sense, if that makes sense. So where do I see this going? Well, based on what I've seen with other Genesis platformers, which are getting very expensive, into the realms of $200, right? For games that are kind of one-offs, original IPs for the Genesis. I can see this in the height of the excitement. I think it's important to look at the availability. As of right now, we have a lot of cart only, not very many complete, and the complete asking prices right now are anywhere from $130, $150 without the manual, upwards of $200 complete, $125 without the manual. Bidding, it'll be very interesting to watch this with bidding complete. So very little copies available complete at the moment. Let's see what people are actually paying for this. All right, so somebody got a nice deal here, $97 complete. That'll kind of probably keep things in check for a bit, because that's under $100 free shipping for a complete copy, assuming there's nothing too wrong with it. So that means prices probably won't go into the stratosphere too soon. $150, let's see here, $130, $150. So it seems like the price as of right now on the low end, $100. This is complete with case, so that probably means no manual. And upwards of $150 at the most. $170 seems a little high. Okay, so some of them actually are dipping into that $160 territory. Okay, so I can see once the new trailer drops for this film and people start getting excited for this, and we get within a month or two of the movie, you're probably going to see this start hitting the $200 range, right? Prices are already kind of heading in that direction, and I don't think there's enough copies to go around for all the Ghostbusters fans, and there's tons of Ghostbusters fans. But I do think this will come down a little bit after the film. The reason why I don't think it'll come down too much, though, is I think there is a general scarcity around this game. I think a lot of people would be content with just the cartridge, but the hardcore Ghostbusters collectors that may not even be aware of this game are going to want it complete, most likely. So this is one that I would advise probably trying to keep your eyes out on sooner rather than later as we get closer towards the film. So thank you, Eric. Thank you for that recommendation, and hope you enjoyed the analysis. All right, let's jump into the last game that I'm going to be talking about for this video. And I wanted to mix it up a little bit. Let's do an N64 game, and let's do one that practically nobody talks about. This is Aidyn Chronicles. This has the distinction of being one of the only RPGs on the Nintendo 64. So, you know, you have games like Paper Mario, you have Quest 64, you have Ogre Battle, and then you have Aidyn Chronicles, So I have played this game, and this is why I wanted to include it, because it's kind of an interesting game to talk about. I think this is one of the most ambitious games on the console. I think a lot of people were scared away from Aidyn Chronicles because word on the street is that this game is pretty bad. And I don't disagree with that. This game has a lot of issues. It's extremely slow. The movement, the general sense of movement in this game is like a turtle's pace. It's very, very slow. And it's not for everybody. Combat is brutally slow. Brutally slow. However, the scope of the worlds and just the open... The sense of freedom in this game is unparalleled on the N64, only rivaled by games like the Zelda games, right, in a sense, or Super Mario 64. And I know it sounds kind of crazy to compare Aidyn Chronicles to those games, and I'm not saying it's as good as those games. I'm just saying the sense of exploration in a world on an N64 game, there's not a lot of games that give you the vast scale of this. It really feels like you're on this giant fantasy epic world adventure. Now that I've got you all excited, let me bring you back down to earth here and say that this is still a pretty poor game, okay? I had my fun with it, but I tend to have a lot of fun with games that are like this, okay? So it's very important. I want you to know that I'm not recommending you go out and buy this game. I'm just recommending that if you are an N64 collector or an RPG collector, to keep your eye on this one. I don't want people buying this and then getting mad at me because they didn't have fun with it. Believe me, I understand this is not a game for everybody. But anyway, let's do a little bit of an analysis on the price. And this is very interesting to see here, okay? If you look, this game has actually maintained since back in 2013. Complete prices, $40, $30, $35, $40. For some reason, this game spiked to $90 at some point. Somebody must have been really desperate for a copy of this. Actually saw a pretty big dip here. And just a small gradual increase, right? If you compare this to other N64 game price increases, especially as we get into 2020, this is nothing, right? This is nearly the same price that this game has been since 2013. Currently topping out at around $65, $70, it seems. So why is this? Also to note, loose copies are pretty much stagnant. They are seeing very little movement. There also is a rare cart of Aidyn Chronicles that is... Oh, well, there it is. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Here's my example. The cart that is gray for Aidyn Chronicles is way more sought after. It's important to keep this in mind. So if you ever see a copy of Aidyn Chronicles sell for an astronomical price, it is most likely because it has the gray cart. However, with all the N64 reproductions that are going on these days, be careful out there, okay? Be very careful. The normal cart is the black version. So let's take a look at what's available out there right now. We have an $80 complete in box. We have apparently just $70 without the manual. I'm just going based on titles here. They're giving you... oh, okay. I thought they were doing Aidyn Chronicles with the cart and then just throwing in a random manual for Zelda. But yeah, that's a really weird lot. Let's see here. Oh, this is so scary, right? Like, look at how many gray variants there are for Aidyn Chronicles suddenly. These used to be really rare and sought after. Now there's suddenly an influx of them. Be careful. Be careful with those repros out there. Look at this copy with all these rental stickers. Well, I guess at least you know you're getting an authentic copy. So there's a decent amount of cart only out there. There's not a ton of complete, so there's not a lot to go around for this game. Why is the price still so low, though? And I think it's because of the things I discussed. I think it's because N64 collectors just don't care to play it. Because it's supposed to be such a poor RPG, and I do think a lot of people just don't know about this game because most people haven't played it and they can't talk about it, so they just don't mention it. They're kind of just like, oh yeah, it's that game that's supposed to be really poor, I'm not going to bother with that one. Or I don't want people thinking I'm recommending terrible games like PeteDorr does, so I'm just not going to mention it and try and mislead people, which is why I'm trying to be pretty clear with this one. I would still recommend this, though, if you want to see one of the more ambitious games on N64, if you're into that kind of thing and you want to kind of suffer through a very slow adventure and extremely slow combat, one of the most slow combat systems on any RPG of all time. Anyway, where do I see the price on this one going? This is an interesting one. There's not a ton to go around. In fact, when I was hunting my copy of this, it took me quite a while to secure a copy. It was not an easy game to hunt for. It is definitely on the higher uncommon scale. It's not rare, but it is not a common game by any means. I just don't think there's enough of this game to go around. And it draws to different crowds, right? It draws to RPG collectors. It draws to people that are going for full N64 collections, which good luck to them. That's pretty insane. And it draws to people that just kind of are into more obscure niche games. I still don't see a huge price increase for this because of the general poor reception for this game. Can I see this game reaching triple digits? Yes, absolutely. Considering that current asking prices are not too far off from that. I can kind of see Aidyn Chronicles maybe topping off at around 120, 130 in the year or two to come. Do you need to rush out and try and get this? No, there's never really going to be too much of a demand for this, so don't worry about that. It's not something that you need to be on the lookout for immediately. Just keep your eyes peeled and be smart about what you decide to buy for this in terms of price. But yeah, if you're an RPG collector, you're probably going to want this one in your collection just because of the risk that being in that genre poses to the price of this game. Yeah, so that's going to do it. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed episode 2 of Price Check. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, a like is very much appreciated to know that you guys are, still enjoying this series. And also, be sure to leave a comment below. Let me know a game that you want me to talk about for future episodes. And every future episode of Price Check, I will pick a random comment from one of you and talk about that game and give you a little shout out. Or if you're impatient or you don't want to, risk, oh, is PeteDorr going to pick my game? Go over to my Patreon and I have a pledge level that will allow you to force me to talk about a game, just like I did for Ghostbusters today. And if you want my analysis, that's the way to do it. Also, just a word of caution, I am not hugely into collecting for certain consoles, so I know a lot of people are going to want to know my thoughts on consoles like the Switch. I don't do a ton of Switch collecting. I will definitely do my best to analyze prices for you if you so choose so. But just keep in mind that I may not be the biggest expert in Switch prices, or say, PS4 prices for that matter, especially when it has to do with limited run style games, okay? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next episode.